The morning sunlight filtered through the towering glass windows of the corporate high-rise, casting crisp reflections across the polished marble floors. Nina Clark adjusted her blazer nervously, her heels clicking softly against the floor as she stepped into the lobby. She had been up all night reviewing her portfolio, preparing for a critical client presentation. Just yesterday she had endured humiliation, the sting of betrayal as her former boss had fired her, citing performance concerns that were entirely fabricated. Her stomach churned with a mix of anxiety and determination. She had worked tirelessly for years to build her reputation, her skills honed through long hours and relentless dedication. And now, as she walked into the same building where her career had been unjustly derailed, a spark of defiance pushed her forward. Today wasn't just about proving her talent, it was about reclaiming her dignity. As Nina approached the elevator, she felt the faint tension of the past weighing on her shoulders. The memory of her ex-boss's condescending words and smirks flashed in her mind, a reminder of the duplicity she had faced. She clenched her jaw, forcing herself to focus. "I am here for myself," she whispered under her breath. "Not for anyone else." The elevator doors slid open, and she was greeted by a lobby buzzing with employees and visitors, all moving with purpose and urgency. The receptionist offered a polite nod, directing her to the 20th floor where the new CEO, Victor Hale, was observing the transition and onboarding employees. Nina had heard whispers about him, a strategic, brilliant billionaire who had quietly rebuilt failing companies and earned a reputation for keen judgment and subtle authority. But she had never seen him in person. Walking toward the conference room, she adjusted the documents in her hands and entered the space just as a team meeting was ending. The room fell silent, and all eyes turned toward her, curious about the new hire, or the former employee returning under scrutiny. Nina felt the weight of judgment in the air but remained composed, standing tall and meeting gazes with quiet confidence. At the head of the room, a man sat quietly, observing. Victor Hale. His sharp eyes scanned the room with measured attention, settling briefly on Nina. She felt an unexplainable tingle of recognition, though she had never met him before. Something in his gaze hinted at awareness, perception, and subtle intrigue. The meeting concluded, and Nina was asked to give a brief introduction. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice steady but carrying a tone of quiet authority. "I'm Nina Clark, and I've been preparing to contribute to this team with dedication and precision." Her words were concise, professional, and confident, designed to convey competence without arrogance. Victor's eyes narrowed slightly as he listened, his expression unreadable. But there was an unmistakable intensity, a recognition of her skill, her tone, and the conviction in her delivery. Something about the cadence, the clarity, and the precision of her voice seemed familiar, though he couldn't place it immediately. "Impressive," Victor finally said, his voice calm, commanding attention without harshness. "You speak with clarity, confidence, and precision. Not everyone can command attention in this way, especially in high-pressure environments." Nina felt a subtle warmth in her chest. For the first time since her firing, someone in authority had recognized her skill and character without judgment or bias. She nodded politely, careful not to overreact, but inside, a spark of hope had ignited. The ex-boss, seated at the side of the room, shifted uncomfortably. He had anticipated a meek, apologetic return, perhaps a groveling plea for reinstatement. Instead, Nina's poise and self-assurance radiated a quiet power that unsettled him. Whispers circulated, subtle glances exchanged among employees who were now witnessing a woman who refused to be diminished by past betrayal. Victor continued observing silently, making mental notes on her demeanor, her communication skills, and the subtle hints of resilience and strategic thinking she exhibited. There was more here than met the eye. He could tell from the way she carried herself that Nina had endured hardship and had emerged with both wisdom and poise. After a brief pause, he leaned back slightly, crossing his arms, and addressed the room. "It's clear that talent isn't always recognized immediately, and sometimes, circumstances obscure potential. I intend to ensure that genuine skill and integrity are acknowledged here. Pay attention to the people around you. They may surprise you. The ex-boss flushed, realizing that Victor's attention was subtly highlighting Nina's presence, indirectly undermining his previous claims about her incompetence. Nina, however, remained focused, taking in the dynamic with quiet observation, her mind already calculating her next steps. She would navigate carefully, reclaim her position, and prove that merit and integrity cannot be ignored. As the meeting ended, Victor called Nina aside, speaking quietly but with intent. Your voice, your presence, it stands out. There's something familiar about it, though I can't place where I've heard it before. Nina looked at him, intrigued but cautious. I speak clearly because I have to, she said lightly. Every word counts when you've worked to prove yourself under scrutiny. Victor's eyes lingered on her, a subtle recognition dawning, but he said nothing further, letting the moment stretch with unspoken potential. Inside, Nina felt the undercurrent of suspense, a sense that her skills, her past, and perhaps even a hidden connection were about to converge in unexpected ways. The day was far from over, but a shift had already occurred. The stranger who had entered the room with quiet authority was now evaluating her not just as a professional, but as a person of discernible character and impact. And though neither spoke of it yet, a story had begun. A story of recognition, justice, subtle intrigue, and the potential for something unexpected to emerge from a chance observation. The afternoon sun filtered through the tall office windows, neutral and soft, creating a calm, professional atmosphere in the otherwise tense room. Nina Clark remained seated at the small corner desk, her fingers lightly resting on the folder containing her portfolio, her gaze alert yet composed. She had just introduced herself, but the room's energy had shifted subtly. The ex-boss's smirk had faded, replaced by a sense of unease as he realized that the woman he had dismissed was not just competent, but quietly commanding attention. At the head of the room, Victor Hale observed silently. The new CEO's presence was magnetic yet understated, his sharp eyes scanning the room before settling on Nina. There was a subtle recognition in his gaze, as if he had heard her voice before in a context that stirred a faint memory. His expression was calm, deliberate, and unreadable to anyone not paying close attention. Let's continue, Victor said, voice calm, smooth, and carrying a quiet authority. I'd like to hear more about your approach to problem-solving and decision-making under pressure. Nina took a deep breath and leaned slightly forward, adjusting the papers in front of her. I've always believed that decisions made under pressure must be guided by both analysis and intuition. Relying on data is important, but so is reading the situation and anticipating outcomes. Victor nodded, noting her poise and clarity of thought. Indeed. And when faced with ethical dilemmas or conflicting priorities, how do you decide where to place your focus? She paused briefly, considering. I evaluate the immediate impact, the long-term consequences, and the fairness to everyone involved. I try to balance efficiency with integrity, making sure that decisions are both responsible and principled. Victor's gaze sharpened, impressed. Exceptional. That balance between strategy and morality is rare. The ex-boss shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He had assumed that Nina's return would be meek, perhaps apologetic. Yet here she was, articulating her perspective with confidence and authority, demonstrating the very qualities he had overlooked. Victor continued his subtle evaluation, peppering the discussion with challenging scenarios that tested both judgment and analytical skill. Each question Nina answered demonstrated her insight and composure. She didn't just provide solutions. She explained the reasoning behind each choice, anticipating potential outcomes and repercussions. As the session progressed, Victor made occasional notes, his expression attentive but discreet. He didn't interrupt, nor did he provide immediate feedback. His observation was deliberate, designed to assess both capability and character. Nina began to notice his subtle cues, the slight nods, the way his eyes lingered on her reactions, and the faintly approving arch of his brow when her answers exceeded expectations. A quiet tension began to form between them, not discomfort but a slow-building recognition. Victor's attention was focused on her in a way that was both evaluative and deeply respectful. Nina felt a mixture of nervousness and exhilaration, realizing that the stranger she had aided yesterday had now become a pivotal figure in her professional life. At one point, Victor leaned slightly forward, voice quieter, almost intimate. "Nina, your voice. There's a clarity and confidence that is memorable. I have the sense I've heard it before, in a context I can't yet recall, but the impression is undeniable." Serena, or rather Nina, felt a shiver of anticipation. The subtle familiarity suggested that Victor's observation extended beyond the immediate professional interaction. There was an unseen thread connecting their past, their encounter yesterday, and the present evaluation. I don't believe we've met before," Nina said cautiously, unsure whether to speak more. "Yesterday I helped a stranger, that's all." Victor's faint smile hinted at knowing something she didn't. Perhaps. But first impressions, actions, and voice can reveal far more than introductions. "I've been listening, observing, and assessing, not just your answers but your character. And it is impressive." The room seemed to shrink, the bustle of the office outside fading into soft background noise. Nina felt a subtle exhilaration, a sense that the moment held significance far beyond a simple interview. This encounter had been orchestrated, intentional, and charged with purpose. As the session neared its end, Victor leaned back in his chair, gaze fixed on Nina. "What I've observed today confirms that you possess not just the skill set, but the integrity, resilience, and judgment necessary to thrive in high-stakes environments. And that is exactly the kind of talent I value and want on my team." The ex-boss's eyes flicked nervously between Victor and Nina, a faint realization dawning. The woman he had dismissed, undermined, and fired was being validated in a way he could not counter. Nina remained composed, absorbing the weight of recognition, subtle admiration, and the potential for opportunity that extended far beyond the immediate discussion. Victor's attention shifted slightly, his voice softening. "Before we conclude, I want you to know that your actions yesterday, the kindness you demonstrated, spoke volumes. Talent and skill are essential, but character is irreplaceable. And that is what drew my attention to you today." Nina exhaled slowly, a mixture of pride, relief, and cautious excitement washing over her. The stranger she had helped, the CEO she had never expected to meet, had recognized her worth, assessed her integrity, and subtly positioned her for the opportunity she had long deserved. The afternoon sun began to soften further, casting neutral, soft light into the room. Nina packed her portfolio carefully, her hands steady, but her mind alive with possibilities. The professional stakes had been clarified, and a subtle emotional current flowed between her and the man who had once been a stranger, now an observer, evaluator, and potential ally in her career. The day had shifted irrevocably, from a simple act of kindness to a transformative encounter that promised recognition, justice, and the quiet beginnings of trust and connection. The office had settled into an almost serene rhythm after the intense morning session. Nina Clark sat at her desk, reviewing her notes, but her mind refused to focus entirely on paperwork. Jared Klein's presence lingered in her thoughts, the calm, commanding authority, the subtle warmth, and the undeniable curiosity in his gaze. She had not anticipated that a single act of kindness, paying a stranger's bus fare, could lead to this collision of fate, professionalism, and intrigue. As she organized her documents, Jared walked quietly toward her, his footsteps soft on the polished floor, his gaze never leaving her. The subtle authority in his posture contrasted with the understated respect he carried for her. He stopped just a few feet away, leaning slightly on the desk, observing her without intrusion. "You handle pressure remarkably well," he said, his voice low, smooth, and deliberate. "Not everyone maintains composure under scrutiny. I can see you've endured challenges that refined both skill and character." Nina felt her pulse quicken slightly, a mixture of surprise and appreciation in her chest. I've learned to manage situations," she replied cautiously, careful not to overstate her abilities. Experience teaches resilience. Jared's eyes softened, a subtle approval in his expression. Resilience and integrity. Those are qualities I value above all else. Talent can be taught. Character is inherent. You've demonstrated both. For a moment, silence hung in the air, punctuated only by the distant hum of office activity. Nina could feel the weight of the CEO's attention, not judgmental but discerning. There was a quiet tension in the room, the kind that made every gesture, every word meaningful. Yesterday, Jared continued, leaning forward slightly, when you helped me, it wasn't just an act of kindness. It was a revelation. I noticed decisiveness, empathy, and calm under pressure. Those traits are invaluable, especially in environments where integrity and judgment are constantly tested. Nina blinked, recalling the rain-soaked street and the fleeting moment that had seemed inconsequential at the time. I never imagined that moment could matter beyond the bus, she admitted softly. Small acts often reveal the biggest truths, Jared replied, voice measured but imbued with subtle intensity. It's not only about what you do but why you do it. And that is what makes a lasting impression. Nina's mind whirled. The stranger she had helped, once just a fleeting figure in her life, had now become central to her professional path, evaluating her with discernment, respect, and an almost personal interest in her integrity. Jared straightened slightly, his presence both commanding and reassuring. I need to see how you operate when stakes are high, how you manage pressure, adversity, and expectations simultaneously. This isn't a test of knowledge alone, but of composure, decision-making, and ethics. The afternoon unfolded with a series of subtle scenarios, case studies, and professional dilemmas. Nina responded with precision, honesty, and insight, demonstrating that her abilities were complemented by her ethical judgment and emotional intelligence. Jared's measured observations, slight nods, and faintly approving glances confirmed that she was being assessed beyond mere technical skill. Meanwhile, the ex-boss lingered on the side, attempting to subtly influence perceptions, but the dynamic had shifted. The authority and discernment of Jared Hale were apparent. The attempts at undermining Nina were transparent and ineffective. She remained poised, unflustered, and focused, turning potential tension into an opportunity to demonstrate both skill and character. At one point, Jared posed a scenario involving high stakes and ethical considerations. Nina's response was thoughtful, articulate, and nuanced. She anticipated potential pitfalls and demonstrated a capacity to balance strategic thinking with moral responsibility. The room was silent, save for the quiet ticking of a wall clock, yet the unspoken tension between Nina and Jared was palpable, professional respect mingling with a subtle, almost imperceptible emotional undertone. "Excellent," Jared said finally, his gaze locking on hers. "You've shown insight, resilience, and integrity throughout this process. It's rare to encounter someone who combines all three naturally. Your presence and performance today confirm what I suspected yesterday. There's extraordinary potential here." Nina exhaled, a mixture of relief, pride, and cautious excitement coursing through her. The interview had evolved into a deeply human exchange, where recognition of character, skill, and ethical judgment intersected. She understood that her small act of kindness had catalyzed this encounter, and the stranger she had aided had now become someone whose perception and recognition could shape the trajectory of her professional and personal life. Jared's faint smile carried subtle warmth, a silent acknowledgement of her perseverance and talent. For a brief moment, the intensity of the professional setting softened into a cinematic tableau, a quiet connection forming between two people who had been brought together by coincidence, character, and circumstance. The day was far from over, but the foundation had been laid. Trust, respect, and subtle admiration had taken root. Nina realized that this encounter, beginning with a simple gesture in the rain, had transformed into a complex interplay of professional recognition, personal insight, and the potential for a deeper connection. As the session concluded, Jared spoke quietly, almost as if to himself, yet audible to Nina. "The smallest acts reveal the greatest truths. And today those truths have spoken volumes." Nina packed her portfolio, feeling a mixture of empowerment, anticipation, and curiosity. The stranger, now revealed as the CEO, had observed, recognized, and positioned her not only for professional opportunity but also for an unexpected personal connection. The narrative that had begun with a chance encounter on a rainy street was now evolving into a story of recognition, trust, and the subtle beginnings of admiration, and perhaps something more. The office floor had grown quieter as the afternoon progressed, the soft hum of computers and distant conversations providing a subtle backdrop to the charged energy in the interview room. Nina Clark sat with her portfolio open, her posture calm yet attentive, as if aware that every subtle movement and gesture was being observed. The events of the morning, her ex-boss's attempt to undermine her, the revelation of Jared Klein as the new CEO, had set the stage for a tension that was both professional and profoundly personal. Jared stood near the far side of the room, observing her silently, his expression unreadable yet attentive. The aura of authority he carried was tempered by a faint warmth in his eyes, a subtle acknowledgement of the courage and composure Nina had demonstrated. She had caught him watching her closely during the earlier sessions, noting not only her competence but also her reactions under pressure, her quiet confidence, and the integrity that radiated through every word and gesture. "Let's discuss collaboration and leadership," Jared said softly, his tone deliberate, commanding attention without overt pressure. "I want to understand how you manage dynamic situations, unexpected challenges, and interpersonal conflicts." Nina took a deep breath, recalling the lessons learned from past experiences where resilience and integrity had been her only shields. "I approach challenges by assessing the situation, weighing immediate and long-term consequences, and ensuring fairness in every decision. I communicate clearly and respectfully, even when stakes are high, and I strive to maintain trust with colleagues and clients alike," she explained, her voice steady, carrying both conviction and measured humility. Jared's gaze intensified slightly, observing not only her words but her subtle micro-expressions, the flicker of determination in her eyes, the slight nod of reassurance to herself, and the controlled cadence of her breathing. "Remarkable," he said quietly, a faint approving smile playing across his lips. "Most people discuss strategy and abstraction, but you demonstrate actionable insight coupled with integrity. That combination is rare." The room seemed to shrink, the bustle of the office fading, leaving only the two of them in a cinematic tableau. Nina felt an unexpected tension, a mixture of exhilaration, nervousness, and a quiet curiosity about the man before her. His observation was detailed, deliberate, and precise, yet it was paired with an unspoken acknowledgement of her humanity and character. "You carry yourself with confidence and composure," Jared continued, his voice lowering subtly. "I can see that you handle criticism, challenge, and unpredictability with a balance that is exceptional. And that is exactly the quality I need in this company, not just for operational success, but for culture, morale, and long-term growth." Nina's chest tightened slightly. The subtle weight of his words, the careful recognition of her abilities, and the unspoken understanding between them created a delicate tension. She realized that this was more than an interview. It was an evaluation of her character, judgment, and resilience, conducted not through formal metrics alone, but through direct observation of her actions, demeanor, and integrity. The ex-boss, seated awkwardly at the side, tried to interject at one point, offering a comment designed to undermine her credibility, but Jared's subtle yet firm hand signaled for silence. The authority was clear, precise, and unwavering. Nina noted the power dynamic. Her talent, once dismissed, was now being recognized under the careful scrutiny of someone with the ability to elevate her career beyond measure. As the session continued, Jared shifted the focus toward collaborative problem-solving scenarios. Each hypothetical challenge tested not only strategic thinking but also ethical judgment, interpersonal skill, and leadership. Nina's responses were articulate, thoughtful, and grounded in a combination of experience and principled reasoning. Jared nodded occasionally, taking mental notes, while his gaze lingered, attentive and discerning. For a brief moment, he spoke softly, almost personally. "Nina, what impresses me most is not the answers themselves, but the integrity behind them. The way you approach situations, the consideration you give to others, and your calm assessment of risk. These are qualities that cannot be faked or taught. Nina felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mix of pride, relief, and an unfamiliar thrill. The stranger she had helped, the CEO who had silently observed her, now recognized not just her skills, but her essence, her character, resilience, and humanity. There was a subtle pause, the kind that stretches seconds into tension-filled moments. Their eyes met, hers curious, slightly apprehensive, and his calm, discerning, with a faint undercurrent of respect that hinted at something more than professional interest. "I've seen many employees in my career," Jared said quietly, leaning slightly forward, "but few display a combination of competence, integrity, and composure as you have. I need someone I can trust with responsibility, with influence, and with the subtle intricacies of leadership." Nina's breath caught. The weight of his words, coupled with the quiet intensity of his gaze, made the moment cinematic. She realized that this encounter, beginning with a simple act of kindness yesterday, had transformed into a professional evaluation, a test of character, and the delicate foundation of trust. As the afternoon waned, Jared concluded the session with a soft, almost personal note. "Your performance today confirms what I suspected yesterday. That talent paired with integrity is rare, and it must be recognized. I hope that by the end of this process, you'll understand just how valued and trusted you are." Nina sat back, processing the significance. Recognition, validation, and subtle acknowledgement from someone of Jared's influence was overwhelming, yet empowering. The stranger from the bus stop had become not only the CEO but a discerning observer, evaluating her in a manner that was precise, fair, and deeply human. The day closed with Nina leaving the office, her portfolio in hand, a quiet sense of anticipation and possibility stirring within her. The encounter had evolved from professional assessment to a cinematic narrative of trust, recognition, and subtle emotional connection. And somewhere beneath the layers of evaluation and authority, the possibility of a deeper bond, a slow-burn connection grounded in respect and integrity, had begun to form. The evening sun cast a soft glow across the high-rise office, reflecting off polished surfaces and the glass walls of the conference rooms. Nina Clark stood near her desk, absorbing the day's events. The morning had started with tension, the sting of betrayal from her ex-boss still lingering, but it had transformed into something entirely unexpected. The stranger she had helped the previous day, now revealed as Jared Klein, the new CEO, had observed, evaluated, and recognized her in a way that transcended ordinary professional assessment. Jared approached her quietly, his sharp-tailored suit and calm demeanor contrasting with the subtle warmth in his eyes. "Nina," he said deliberately, his tone even but charged with purpose, "today has been a demonstration, not just of skill, but of integrity, judgment, and resilience. What you've shown confirms what I suspected yesterday. That character matters as much as competence." Nina felt a flutter in her chest. This was more than validation. It was recognition from someone whose authority could shape her future. "Thank you," she whispered, a mixture of pride, relief, and cautious excitement in her voice. "It means a lot to hear that after everything." Jared, nodded, subtle approval in his posture. "I've observed many employees in my career, but few exhibit the balance of skill, judgment, and humanity that you have displayed. That is rare, and it deserves recognition." Her ex-boss, still seated awkwardly at the side, shifted uncomfortably. His attempts to belittle her earlier in the day had been effectively neutralized by Jared's presence and attention. Nina realized that the authority and subtle influence of Jared ensured fairness and the acknowledgement of true talent. She had been dismissed, underestimated, and yet here she was, validated, respected, and poised for opportunity. "Let's finalize things," Jared continued, opening a folder on the desk. Inside were documents outlining a position tailored to her skills, including significant autonomy and responsibility. "This role is not just about executing tasks. It's about shaping initiatives, leading strategically, and influencing outcomes with integrity. You have earned the chance to make an impact here." Nina's hands trembled slightly as she examined the documents. The magnitude of the opportunity was overwhelming. The stranger she had helped on a rainy street had become a pivotal figure in her professional life, offering validation, authority, and trust that she had rarely encountered before. Jared's gaze softened. "Before we conclude, I want you to understand something. Yesterday your actions, simple, human, and generous, set this chain of events in motion. What seemed small revealed volumes about your character. That is why you are here, and why I am confident in your potential." A warmth spread through Nina's chest. The professional stakes had been resolved, but the personal resonance lingered. She felt seen, valued, and respected. It was a rare combination, professional recognition intertwined with human acknowledgement. "Thank you," she said softly, "for seeing me, for trusting me, and for this opportunity. I won't disappoint you." Jared allowed a faint smile to form, subtle yet profound. "It's not just about avoiding disappointment. It's about understanding your worth, exercising your talent responsibly, and knowing that your actions, past, present, and future, will be acknowledged and valued. And I will ensure that." The office quieted as the day drew to an end. Nina packed her portfolio, but she no longer felt nervous or apprehensive. She had faced scrutiny, challenge, and even betrayal, yet she had emerged recognized, respected, and empowered. Stepping toward the window, she glanced at the city below. The rain from the previous day had given way to a muted, reflective glow. The streets shimmered, reflecting the transition she herself had experienced, from uncertainty and dismissal to recognition, validation, and opportunity. Jared stood nearby, his presence steady, authoritative, and quietly protective of the space she now occupied. The subtle connection between them, rooted in respect, acknowledgement, and shared understanding, was undeniable. Neither had spoken of it explicitly, but it hung in the air. A slow-burning tension, a recognition of trust, and the possibility of deeper human connection. "Your day is done," Jared said softly, his voice calm yet commanding. "But this is only the beginning of a story I expect to be remarkable, both professionally and personally." Nina exhaled slowly, a smile spreading across her face. The stranger who had once been just a recipient of her generosity had transformed into a mentor, evaluator, and perhaps the first hint of a connection that could transcend the boundaries of work. The ex-boss, now quiet and subdued, watched silently, realizing that the balance of power and recognition had shifted. Nina, once dismissed and undermined, had not only proven her skill and integrity but had also emerged as someone whose presence demanded respect and acknowledgement. As the evening light dimmed, Nina, felt a quiet surge of hope, empowerment, and subtle exhilaration. She had reclaimed her narrative, her professional recognition was secured, and a slow-burn connection with Jared hinted at possibilities beyond the office walls. The story, which had begun with betrayal and a single act of generosity, concluded with validation, trust, empowerment, and the cinematic hint of a meaningful bond between two people whose lives had intersected by chance but were now intertwined by respect, integrity, and mutual recognition. Nina left the office that evening with a sense of purpose and anticipation. She knew challenges would come, but she had proven her worth. And somewhere, the quiet tension between her and Jared suggested that the next chapters of their intertwined journey, both professional and personal, would be compelling, cinematic, and deeply human.